Thanks very much. Hi, I'm Ewan. I'm the CEO of Koalaa, and I'm joined by Nate, who you'll hear from shortly, who's both the founder and the chief designer. Also, dialed into the call, we've got Niall and Sanish from the Koalaa team who are out in Sierra Leone this week. Also, Dr. Abs Dambaya, who's been our key contact and partner down there. And without him, frankly, we would have struggled an awful lot. The other person without whom we would have found life very difficult is Assad from Brink on the ATIF side, who's also on the call, I hope. Anyway, of the fact we've got two people in Sierra Leone, Nate was out there earlier on this year, and I haven't been. So you'll hear very little from me, because most of what I have to say isn't all at second hand. So let's hear it from Nate, who's been doing a lot. Nate.
You can come next time, Ian. Yeah, so I'm Nate. And on the next slide, I thought it'd be more fun to talk about the people that we're working with. So this is Suleiman. So we met him in September. He lives in Sierra Leone. He's a keen footballer. He's a Manchester United supporter, so that's probably why I like him so much. But he's a dad, and he lives with limb loss. When we met him, we were quite surprised to know that he had never had a prosthetic limb. And these obviously to the question of why is that? And on the next slide, you'll see some of the problems. And there's actually a lot of common themes from the other talks. It's actually so cool to hear everyone, because that part of it's a product problem. Traditional prosthetics aren't designed for people living in Africa. They're not designed for local context. They look like things like this. They are, rigid kind of devices with complicated things on the end. And they're very expensive, ranging from many hundreds of pounds to many thousands of pounds. But aside from the products, there's a severe service problem. The prosthetic service relies a lot on clinics, brick and mortar clinics that you need to be close to get the support. And it relies a lot on very heavily trained clinicians. You add all this together, the price and the infrastructure, and it means that 90% of people who need a prosthetic limb around the world get absolutely nothing. So we're talking about 30 million people around the world that have no access to anything. So on the next slide, you'll see what we're trying to do. Very simply, we just want to build a sustainable solution to both of these problems for anyone, no matter where they are on the planet. And it comes in two parts. First, we've reinvented the prosthetic and looked at one that's more applicable for local situations. But importantly, this what takes a lot of work is reimagining a service that actually makes sense in a place like Sierra Leone and beyond. So if we start with the prosthetic on the next slide, we've stopped looking at it like rigid medical devices and looked at it like other things that you wear. And this is purely inspired by people like Suleiman, who live with these limb differences. We looked like clothes. So we make prosthetics that are soft and flexible. I don't know if you can see my screen, but it's used fabric. It's built very much like a trainer. What that lets you do is make it much more cheaply. And also you're able to fit it very, very quickly and send it to people that are very far away in remote parts of the planet, which is really great. And what that leads to is an entirely new way of servicing. So on the next slide, you can see that instead of having a clinic and staffed with tens of heavily trained technicians, you can have all of that support and all of the ability to fit people with prosthetic limbs in a box, in a suitcase-sized box. This is amazing for people because you don't need to, you can do that in a clinic, but you can also chuck it in the back of a bike and go to where the users are if they're in a remote part of the world, remote part of the country. So you don't need expensive infrastructure. You don't need specialist personnel. You can have more of a peer-to-peer community looking after each other. So this all sounds very nice, but does it work? Well, this is what we've been doing with ATIF. So on the next slide, you'll see what we did as an immediate step was just go and do it. We already started. So in September, we went out, Niall and I, who Niall loved it so much, he's back there. We went out for a week. We fitted 20 people across 5 different locations, and all we had was a suitcase full of these soft prosthetics and a pair of scissors and a bit of chalk so you could cut it to size. We went around meeting amazing people and proving that actually it doesn't take a lot to get this going. And while we were there, we were very careful. So on the next slide, you see, we want to be a force multiplier. So we're working with the local governments, we're working with the rehab centers, we're working with the Ministry of Health, and it's all supported by the Clinton Health Access Initiative to make sure that we're embedding within the system and not trying to come in as an outside savior trying to impose our will. It's very much listening to the people who work in this sector and who live with the differences, and letting them build the service and us just do what they tell us, essentially. So if we take to the next slide, you can see some of their kind of outcomes. We've been working with young children as young as 4 to 5. I think she's 5 now. And working with really skilled tradesmen. So that's him carving a really impressive sculpture with one of our sleeves, but just listening to them and listening to how they want to be looked after and how they want to work with prosthetics. I think I'll hand back to Ewan now just to take us through what this means and why we're so excited about it.
Thanks, Nate. Got the next slide, please. So what does this mean for us and what do we do next? We are working with the Ministry of Health of the Sierra Leone government towards a plan for national rollout with full engagement for them. So a draft was passed to our team in Sierra Leone yesterday, which we're working through, but looks very exciting. We also believe strongly in evidence. Prosthetics in general, not just in Africa, has been a very, very understudied and under evidenced part of care. So we're very keen to build that up. So we're doing a study on all the people fitted to date and the ones we're fitting this week, and then the ones which we're leaving behind for people we trained in Sierra Leone to fit in the next couple of weeks with Chai, and that should give us a pretty substantial evidence base. But then we want to build on that as we go forward. So you've got something there to take, showing the benefits, but also around the economics to other countries in Africa. So that's all very much something that's scalable across Africa. What we're moving towards, though, I think is come out of the work with ATIF strongly, is that we can do this and we can reach an awful lot of people for a relatively very small amounts of money. And we're moving towards this sort of what we call a flexible and blended funding model, the idea of various co-payers based on ability to pay. But in a country like Sierra Leone or anywhere in Africa, our goal is to be able to, for $100,000 a year, look after 1,300 people, as in provide them and support them with a prosthetic upper limb. That works out at about $1.50 per week per person. It is scalable. We think probably in Sierra Leone, maybe the users could fund $5,000 of that, maybe the government $25,000 of that. Whereas in other countries which are higher income, we think more of that could be picked up by the users and the local government. So that's exciting. We think it's got real potential, but that's part of the focus of the next round of work. And then finally, I think we always like to finish with the last slide, please. It's back to Suleiman. Here he is. So it's a relatively small investment, but it's a very big impact. It's a huge impact from him. I mean, he's able to participate more fully in bringing up his toddler, but he's also able to really, really go for it on the football pitch. And we know that means everything to him. Both of those things, vitally important. That's it. Thank you very much. That's from Koalaa.